Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Kim, and I hope you're having a fabulous day today. If you're interested in true crime stories like I am, I hope that you would consider hitting that subscribe button. But either way, thanks for being here. Today, we're going to be talking about Eve Leatherland. This is a story that it just makes me sad that this continues to happen time and time again. Eve was only 22 months old when tragedy struck her home in the hands of her mother's boyfriend. She was betrayed and left to die alone. So let's talk about Eve. But first, a word from our sponsor. Thanks to Established Titles for sponsoring today's video. Established Titles is so fun because they take the old Scottish custom that anyone who owns land in Scotland, you are considered a lord or a lady. Therefore, Established Titles offers you to buy land. And what is cool is it's just 1 square foot of land ownership, but this gives you the title of lord or lady. I got one for myself. But I think this is the perfect gift to the person that is so hard to buy for because they have everything, or for a young one that is into princesses. I managed to get some of my Christmas shopping done early, and so I got these little princesses their own certificate with their name and the title of a lady. And I know they're absolutely going to love this, and they're going to be bragging to their friends of how they are ladies now. What's cool is you can put this on plane tickets or your credit cards. Just imagine you show up with your credit card and you're getting like bad service or something and you're like, look, I am a lady. Lady Kimberly Flower. They have options of lord or lady as well as couple packages. You and your partner can have adjoining land. This is perfect for a wedding gift. You get the plot number on the piece of land that you own. Who wants to go with me and check it out in Scotland? Last but definitely not least is that Established Titles has dedicated themselves to planting a tree with every order, and they plant them all over the world. They are partnered with One Tree Planted as well as Trees for the Future organizations to help the efforts of reforestation. This makes me feel good that my purchase is helping the environment. Established Titles is running an early Black Friday sale for my viewers, which you will receive 10% off of your purchase by clicking on my link in the description box below and use the code Kimflower at checkout. That's Established Titles /Kimflower. And of course, as always, the link will be below.
The first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my plot, within a few minutes of walking distance. Depending on how many of you want to become a lord or lady, we can build our little community, our little Kimberly Flower rockstar community.
Thanks to Established Titles for sponsoring today's video, and thanks to all of you for listening. On October 5th, 2017, at 12:44 p.m., Abigail Leatherland, living in Liskeard in the UK, dialed 999 to get help for her young child. On the phone with emergency services, she tells them her 22-month-old daughter, Eve, is not breathing and needs their help. After providing that information, she gives the phone to her live-in boyfriend, Tom Kurt. They did this so the operator could walk him through CPR. And as her baby girl lays there on the floor, lifeless, she calls her mom. You will notice in this story that Abigail always puts herself first. In under 2 minutes, the ambulance would arrive at 2 Castle Street, and paramedics would attempt to save Eve's life. They immediately started an IV and attached electrodes to Eve's chest, but they could not detect any heartbeat. They immediately got her on the stretcher and out into the waiting ambulance. Although the hospital was less than 20 minutes away, they actually sent a hospital to life-lift little baby Eve to Deerford Hospital in Plymouth, England. Eve would reach the hospital and life-saving equipment doctors would try, but everyone was too late. In fact, it was too late to save Eve when the 999 call was dialed, but they didn't give up. So how did we get here? Eve Jessie Kate Leatherland was born on December 1st, 2015 to her mother Abigail Leatherland and her father Dean Bird. Abby and Dean were together off and on for over a 2-year period, but he knew her for years. No matter what was happening between them, he cherished his daughter. He said, quote, "She used to come into my bed every morning. She was always happy and really was a daddy's girl," unquote. He said that when he heard Abby had moved away to Liskeard, he didn't believe it because it was over 5 hours away, and at the time, he was still keeping Eve 1 day a week. He said he thought Abby may have gone for a vacation, but not that she'd actually stay and move away without telling him. Regardless, he did everything he could to get in contact with her again. The last time Dean ever saw his baby girl was when she was 15 months old. In April 2017, did in fact move Eve and her other son, who we are going to call Elle. He was only 3 years old at the time. She moved with both of them and a man she was dating at the time. That relationship didn't last long. They ended up breaking up in June, and he moved out, but Abby stayed in the house with her young kids. There is doctor appointment visits that prove that at the time, Eve was happy and healthy. It was said that Eve could be a clingy child, very attached to her mommy, and was sometimes hard to settle at nighttime. She didn't like to be left alone and would sometimes scream for hours. Abby would agree with this statement as well, as other people can contest to that. As anyone who has dealt with a young child knows, there sometimes needs patience and just sometimes more cuddles. Eve's pediatrician records from before the move also show a well taken care of little girl, but something changes. In July of 2017, Abby was contacted on Facebook by Tom Kurd. He reached out saying that he thought that she was pretty. This did it for Abby, and they started talking on the phone, and they had their first date around July 20th. Things moved quickly for the couple, with Abby saying she liked that Tom was a dad having children of his own. In court, they would both have you believe things were great between them. In fact, as of September 4th, Tom was already living with Abby and her 2 young children. Not just living with them, but according to Abby's own words, Tom was taking care of the children as well. That's right, you guys. Her brand new boyfriend, her 2-month-long relationship, she's already moving the responsibility of her kids over to him. Tom's kids were living with his ex that was 5 hours away. And what does a couple of his ex-partners have to say? Well, one of his girlfriends did take the stand to answer questions about the kind of man Tom was around his children. And to be clear, she was very young, and he'd met her, yes, you guessed it, on Facebook. At the same time, he'd had a 2-year-old daughter and a 5 or 6 month old son. She was not the mother of his children, but spent quite a bit of time around them. She was 18 and Tom was 27. She described for the court instances where Tom picked up his young son by the back of his sleeper to shake him and shout in his face. She said she saw him hold his son against the wall and scream at him. Remember, this is a 6-month-old baby. She said he carried the baby boy back to his crib, still holding him by the back of his footy pajamas, and slammed him down in his bed. She said she just avoided the room because she was afraid of what she would see and what would happen. She was very young and frankly terrified because she'd never seen anything like this before. Not many of us have, and I hope I never do. When the prosecutor asked why she felt uneasy to do anything, she said, I was scared and I was afraid I would be hurt myself. She would continue to say that I knew it was wrong and I should have done something, but I was young and I was scared. If I couldn't do anything, then the best thing for me to do was always to be there when the children were around him. She was also said she feared for the baby's life and that she'd never seen an adult treat a child that way. Then she explained how Tom started to isolate her. He made her cut out all of her family and her friends. One day, he told her that he was going to Cornwall to help move things after a friend's mother died. She never saw him again. Like, he literally said, hey, I'm going to help a friend move, and just never returned. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that that was a good day, a good thing in that young girl's life. The mother of Tom's children did also testify. She would say that sometimes he would lose his temper and throw things, but she didn't worry about their safety. One might say from the area, bullocks. Now that we know what kind of guy Tom the douche was, let's talk about the beautiful angel Eve Leatherland. We can't say what happened in the house and what happened to Eve, but during the trial, this is what was said. First, we heard from the paramedics who said that Eve had no cardiac activity. They also noticed a small amount of blood on her cheeks and a bruise on her pelvis. They also testified that when they tried to secure her to the stretcher, her arm wouldn't bend at the elbow and her toes were already blue. The paramedic supervisor said they believed rigor had set in. So we can deduct that for some hours had passed as Eve was lifeless in her dirty blood-stained bed. So the 999 call was way too late. When she was at the hospital, the nurse Sophie took care of Eve and testified what she had witnessed. She said Eve looked dead already. She was incredibly pale with dirty fingernails, bruising around her diaper line, what she said looked like a splayed hand. She would also say that they weren't able to revive her because they weren't able to open her jaw because it was so rigid. Her arms and legs too. She brought Abigail and Tom to Eve's bedside, letting them know the outlook was very grim. Abby did seem initially upset, and Tom, well, he just couldn't sit still. He was agitated. He was probably sitting in there thinking, man, I may get in trouble for this. And why I say this, because he knows exactly what happened leading up to how we got here. They were then brought into a family room so a doctor could get information, explain that Eve wasn't going to survive and would likely die soon. So they get this news that she's going to die soon, and their reaction is, can we go outside for a cigarette? And Nurse Sophie would testify that when Abby and Tom came back in from that cigarette, they were smiling and laughing. What could possibly be that freaking funny? They weren't in the room just a few moments more when they asked to go out for another cigarette. And Sophie, the nurse, told them no. She said she had been sharp with them, but the little girl was laying there dying. Technically had already died, but they were doing everything they could to bring her back. I know the nurse was thinking, where are these people's moral compasses? I know I am. Shortly after, Eve Leatherland was pronounced dead at only 22 months old. According to the doctors that testified, Eve's tiny body was brutalized twice a few days apart, but that wasn't the cause of death, technically. What is shocking is someone gave her an overdose of a narcotic. The pathologist would testify that Eve had a skull fracture to the back of her head that she had on late September 30th or early morning, October 1st. And during the assault, she got several broken ribs. Then a few days later, she was attacked again because her skull and ribs were in stages of healing when they were broken again. She had 11 fractures and 5 ribs. The doctors made it very clear that nothing was wrong physically or on a generic level to cause this. She had no bone deficiencies, and they thoroughly tested. They wanted to make sure. Also, this was not something that was from roughhousing from her young 3-year-old brother. They talked about the difference in adult and child's ribs, how adult ribs are solid and stiff, but children's ribs are elastic and flexible, so it would take a lot of force to cause her injuries. Also, during the autopsy, they found Eve had a large liver laceration, which was caused by a tremendous amount of force or blunt force pressing on her liver and tummy to push into her spine. I have to give a reminder, she was only 22 months old, less than 2 years old. It's just shocking. The doctor said Eve's injuries were what you'd expect to see from a baby falling out of a 1 or 2-story window or a high-speed car crash. As I mentioned, this isn't what exactly killed her. See, Eve was given a high dose of cocodol, which in the US that is equivalent to Tylenol with codeine. Eve had a fatal overdose of codeine in her system, an adult size overdose. The prosecutor stated that they thought she was given it to hide the symptoms of the pain from the broken ribs. Broken ribs are incredibly painful. I can only imagine the pain Eve was going through. The doctors were also very clear in the hospital on the stand. If either Abby or Tom had taken Eve to the doctor, they believed she could have been saved. The skull fracture and the rib fractures were healing. They didn't say if the liver would have needed surgery or not, but they were very clear that if she had been helped instead of effectively poisoning her, they could have saved her. Before I continue, I should point out that both Tom and Abby were being charged with murder and manslaughter by gross negligence and causing or allowing the death of a child. The detectives offered evidence that they believed Tom was the one to inflict the assaults on Eve, but also pointed out that the 2-bedroom apartment was small and it was almost impossible Abby wasn't aware of what was happening. As mentioned early, Abby's ex-boyfriend talked about how Eve was clingy, especially for her mom, and that she would scream for hours if left alone. This is not Eve's father, Dean, stating this. There is evidence that Dean was a loving and caring father who would go to the ends of the earth for his little girl, but we'll stick a pin in that for now. We'll come back to it. But in general, even Abby stated this about Eve. The point being that she lived in the apartment with her daughter also. How did she not know about her injuries and the terrible pain she must have been in? And is she the one who gave the codeine to Eve? We may not ever truly know, but can tell you where the court case landed for the two. The codeine was given to Tom by his grandfather. In the UK, you can purchase low-dose codeine over the counter at pharmacies, or at least you could at the time, but this was a very strong prescription strength. Apparently, Tom had told his grandfather that he had back pain and migraines, so his grandfather had gotten the medicine for him. The medicine was found still in blister packs on the small plastic cart beside Abby and Tom's bed. Abby took the medicine for cramps that she got. There was no one saying the baby got into the medicine where she could have maybe accidentally ingested it. And this was not something that Abby or Tom's defense even tried to put out there that maybe she got a hold of it. Tom and Abby did both take the stand. There's not much noteworthy from either of them. Like most of these cases, the finger pointing begins for the couple. It wasn't me, it was them, this back and forth. Tom said he didn't hurt Eve. Abby said it wasn't her, so it must have been Tom. When the coding is discussed, Tom does say something I found quite telling. He said, quote, "I'm not blaming Abigail, but I'm not responsible," unquote. He's on trial for his life, and he's a piece of shit on a good day, for sure. But when asked about the coding, he doesn't want to blame her. Tom also did something that really irritated me. He tried to blame Eve's 3-year-old brother. Literally, no moral compass whatsoever. Reportedly, he tried to say that Al was a rowdy boy. The 3-year-old son was a rowdy boy, that he had been found standing on Eve. I can't imagine how a 3-year-old would be able to balance and stand on a 22-month-old that would be, moving around and keep a balance, considering he's standing on top of her. But that's what Tom's story is. And Tom would say that this happened repeatedly. And on one of these days, he found Elle standing on Eve. He said when he came into the room that the little boy got down, and Tom told Abby about it so that she could talk to Elle about being nicer to his sister. Nothing about Eve screaming or crying, just a random story that apparently he did tell Abby, and she did talk to Elle about being naughty. Both of them said that Eve had been sick for a while. Abby's whole story was that she thought Eve had a viral infection. She had been throwing up and sleeping a lot. When Abby would take Elle to the nursery school, she would leave Eve home with Tom. This was a round trip 45 minutes twice a day, but other than that, they were always together. Abby would say that she generally slept in, so she usually told Tom to get up and take care of the kids and get them their cereal in the morning. When she got up around 10:30 in the morning on this day, and this is no different leading up to Eve's death, when she got up around 10:30 in the morning over the last 2 weeks, Eve had already been up and had eaten, and then she was put back to bed. She thought she had a viral infection, so she needed her sleep. Didn't even check on her when she got up. Tom, for his part, basically said the same thing, that Eve had not been feeling well for the last week or so, and that she wasn't keeping much food down and sleeping a lot. A week, and they didn't take her to a doctor. Some of the side effects of codeine are nausea, vomiting, drowsiness, and confusion, and that's in adults. Eve's crib was found broken outside by the detectives. And this is always a mystery to me. I still wonder how her crib was broken. Like, that's not something generally you hear, but she was too, so I don't know. She was left to sleep on a dirty, bloody mattress with no sheet on it. She had thrown up on her blankets, and they found the blankets in the washer. The time of death was between 7 and 9 a.m. that morning, but when Abby woke up at 10:30, she didn't check on Eve, so the call didn't come in until after 12. That would require caring, and in my opinion, she did not. And why I say that is because while Eve laid on that bloody mattress all that week before bleeding internally, Abby and Tom watched TV, played video games, and sent each other cute text messages. Just before the jury was given the case, the prosecutor dropped the murder charge for Abby. Yes, I know, it made me just as angry. The prosecutor said they no longer believed that Abby assaulted, medicated, or wanted Eve to die or suffer serious harm. They said, quote, "This does not mean that Abigail is innocent or without liability. We say she failed Eve and did so in a big way because she heard, saw, or sensed what was happening and basically just looked away, buried her head in the sand. She did nothing and failed to seek what Eve obviously needed, and that was medical assistance." The jury deliberated for 2 hours. I'm not sure what they did with their extra time in that 2 hours because they are guilty, guilty, guilty. But anyways, they found both of them guilty. Tom was found guilty of murder of Eve, and Abigail was found guilty of causing or allowing death of a child. Tom was sentenced to life. He must serve at least 20 years before parole is considered. The UK whole life sentences are rare. Abigail Leatherland, Eve's mom, I do say that lightly, was only sentenced to 3.5 years. 3.5 years, guys. She was told with good time she would only need to serve half. Guess what? She has since been released. There is so much I want to say to her, but I will leave it at this. Get some help and never, ever have any more children. For the length of the trial, Eve's dad drove 11 hours round trip every day to the courthouse. He said when he was initially told of her death, he thought that it was a viral infection. As we've seen happen before, he had to learn some really hard truths sitting in the courtroom across from the man who murdered his child. I cannot tell you how painful that must have been for him. He said that after the sentencing that he was surprised that Tom had gotten 20 years. He had feared he would only get 13. When asked about Abby, he said, quote, "She has never been wicked, but never used to feed the kids properly and was more worried about going out and drinking," unquote. When Eve was born, Abigail did not put her father, Dean, on Eve's birth certificate. Because of this, Dean had to fight for 2 years to get the right to bury his little girl while her body was kept in a freezer. When Dean was allowed to bury her, he paid tribute to his little girl. Quote, "We all know they needed a princess in heaven, and heaven got the best there is. You, my princess, will always be my princess, but remember one thing. If one day you find your prince, you remember I'm daddy and you're my princess. I love you more than you'll ever know, and today we lay you to sleep in your forever bed. I love you. Night, night, my angel. You kept the sun shining all day," unquote. Eve's grave was covered in beautiful pink and white flowers. Her little pink coffin was taken to the church in a carriage pulled by 4 stunning white horses. I have to say, this case made me so mad. It's so frustrating. When she was ignored by her mother, there is no help for Tom. He is just a bad person through and through. I didn't see any mention of mental health issues or substance abuse issues. So how can you as a mother bury your head in the sand so much? Again, it just angers me. Anyways, let's leave a pink heart for little 22-month-old Eve and her surviving family in the comments. Just a crazy, crazy story, you guys. But just a little announcement, crazy case. It's hard to unwind from that. But anyways, I am going to 2 videos per week. So if you guys have some case suggestions, please leave them down in the comments. Thanks to all my channel members and my Patreons who continue to support me. Their names are on the screen. If you would like early access to new videos or decide the cases I cover next, you can do so by clicking the join button from your desktop. Or there's a video in the description box on how to do it from your phone. Well, if you guys have made it to the end, you guys are rock stars and I love you to death. There are more true crime stories in my Crimey Cases playlist for you to check out. Stay safe, my loves, and remember, if you see something, say something, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.